At issue tonight, the final weekend of the campaign. Vice President Harris is traveling all over the battleground state of Wisconsin, hoping to make it another brick in her blue wall. That's as former President Trump campaigns in suburban Detroit, hoping to put Michigan back in the Republican column.
And in New Hampshire, the comeback kid returns to the state that put him on the path to the presidency. We'll head there live. At Issue starts now.
Hello and happy Friday. Welcome to another live edition of At Issue. I'm Corey Smith.
And I'm Sue O'Connell. Look, there are just 4 days left until you have one final chance to do your civic duty and vote. As millions prepare to head to the polls, there's evidence of foreign interference with our election. U.S.
intelligence agencies say phony videos are popping up online with fake claims about votes in battleground states. And they're coming from overseas. We'll have a full discussion of misinformation and the threat it poses coming up in just a minute.
Let's start here in New Hampshire, where 22 years ago, Bill Clinton's campaign was on the brink of disaster. Gather round, kids. But some good old retail politicking and a second-place finish behind Massachusetts' own Paul Tsongas energized Clinton's campaign, and history remembers Clinton as the comeback kid.
Well, tonight, the 42nd president is back in the Granite State, working to make sure the 47th president is a Democrat. NBC 10's political reporter Matt Pritchard in Nashua for us, where Clinton is stumping for Democrats. Good evening, Matt.
Yeah, good evening, Corey, Sue. In fact, Bill Clinton has already wrapped up his remarks here in Nashua. Talked for about 45 minutes and went through a number of different topics, talking about that campaign long ago when he was the comeback kid here in New Hampshire, how much he appreciates Granite Staters and the way that New Hampshire does politics. But, of course, quickly pivoting to the topics of today and the politics of today, saying that the nation needs Kamala Harris and needs to turn away and not go back towards the politics of Donald Trump. Here's just a little bit of what he had to say during that 45-minute speech. Take a listen.
We can do this together, not by agreeing on everything, but by agreeing to treat each other with decency and honor and listen and try to find a way to work together. That's the America Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are committed to build.
And so that's the message from another high-profile surrogate coming through New Hampshire for Kamala Harris. Of course, we saw Josh Shapiro, the Pennsylvania governor, come through on Wednesday. Before that, we've seen Governor Maura Healey, Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan. They have all made their way through New Hampshire at one point during this election cycle. But when you talk with Republicans here in New Hampshire, they say that they simply don't need that on their side of the ticket. They feel like their voters are motivated all the same, and they don't understand why someone like Bill Clinton would be appealing to voters on the Democratic side. Here's what they had to tell us earlier today.
This campaign is not about all the Washington insiders and swamp creatures. It's about who's better for New Hampshire.
Wouldn't it help, though, to have a bigger name maybe coming from the Trump campaign if Donald Trump was here or one of his family members, one of his surrogates?
We've actually talked to the campaign, and we've said our people are already highly motivated. They don't need external celebrities to get them motivated.
And, of course, their message to voters, their closing message on the Republican side is that they feel they are the party for the working man here in New Hampshire, and they are hoping that they are going to turn out in droves for Donald Trump come November 5th, which, again, is just 4 days away. Both of these campaigns, very different strategies here in the Granite State as they move to the end of the campaign trail. Corey, Sue?
Hey, Matt, last year around this time, we were talking about all the hurt feelings New Hampshire might have about moving the primary first in the nation away, Joe Biden not campaigning there. You see any evidence of the hurt feelings, or is it a love fest?
No, I think everyone has moved on from that at that point. In fact, earlier on this year, I spoke with New Hampshire Democratic Party Chair Ray Buckley and asked him if he felt that he had won in this battle ever since that primary situation earlier on in the year. He told me, we're feeling pretty good. We've moved on from that. We are in full support of Kamala Harris. And the folks I talked with tonight said they appreciated the former president coming through to talk with them. The party seems to have coalesced and united. The question is, will it be enough at the polls come Tuesday? Guys?
All right, Matt Pritchard live in Nashville for us. Matt, we appreciate it. You know, officials have been warning for years now about the dangers of misinformation and disinformation tied to this election.
And you might be wondering, what's the difference between the two? Well, according to the American Psychological Association, misinformation is false or inaccurate information, like just getting the facts wrong, while disinformation is false information with deliberately intended to mislead. Intentionally misstating the facts.
Bad actors have been busy in battleground states spreading misinformation, trying to influence voters and the election results. I mean, take a look at this. This is video from Georgia. It's been circulating widely on social media. Officials say it is fake. It's disinformation, so we've labeled it as such on your screen. It shows a man who claims he's an immigrant who recently arrived in the U.S., got his citizenship, and says he plans to vote multiple times in Georgia. Again, this is fake, a complete and total piece of disinformation.
Now, election officials in Georgia were alerted to the video, called it out as false on all forms of media, and asked for Elon Musk to pull them from X or Twitter, which they did. Federal officials say this is all part of a Russian disinformation operation. This one was flagged by officials and removed. But how many people saw it and never saw the correction? And how much more of this is out there?
Joining us to talk about this is Jankowicz. She served as the Biden administration's disinformation czar and is now CEO of the American Sunlight Project, which studies the threat of online disinformation and works to help stop it. So, Nina, the response we just talked about, how Georgia responded, getting Elon Musk to take it off of X, that seems encouraging, but is that video just the tip of the iceberg?
Well, it's the second such fake that we've seen coming out of Russia in the past week alone. There was also another fake video that showed people allegedly destroying ballots in Pennsylvania that the intelligence community has said came from Russia as well. And in both of these cases, our federal government reacted quite quickly for the federal government within 24 hours, attributing those operations to the adversary of Russia. But, at that point, it's a little bit like putting the genie back in the bottle. In the interim period, those videos gain millions of views on X and other platforms. And fact-checking at that point doesn't necessarily work. And another thing that I'm worried about is that folks don't necessarily trust the intelligence community, the federal government, the folks who need to hear that actually this came from a foreign government intending to deceive us. They're not going to buy it hook, line, and sinker from the feds, unfortunately. And I think there's a lot of trust building that needs to happen on that part, but also on the part of the social media platforms who have rolled back a lot of the work that they were doing this time in 2020 to stem the flow of disinformation from foreign and domestic sources.
Nina, I want to build on that for a minute. Since Elon Musk took over, a lot of the guardrails have been taken off Twitter, or X as it's now known. How is Elon Musk and their team responding to the criticism? And also, we don't want to leave Meta out, and Facebook and the rest of them.
Yeah, well, Elon Musk traditionally has been responding to press and research inquiries with a poop emoji. So that gives you a little bit of an insight into his thinking. But more seriously, since Elon Musk took over what used to be Twitter, now X, he has decimated a team called Trust and Safety, which used to deal with content moderation and manipulation of the platform. They claim that they are still pushing back on this stuff. However, my own organization, the American Sunlight Project, just over 2 weeks ago released a report that found over 1,000 likely Russian bots that were using automation in order to retweet Russian content within 60 seconds of it being posted. And since then, X has taken no action against these bots, even though they violate their inauthentic behavior policies and their spam policies. So they're not doing very much there. The other platforms, as you mentioned, have also kind of rolled things back because Musk makes them all look like golden boys with his behavior. Facebook has said that they're not going to necessarily be moderating disinformation that is related to the election when they did so in 2020. This has all become a huge political issue with a lot of scrutiny being placed not only on the platforms, but researchers like me by individuals like Jim Jordan in Congress. YouTube has rolled back their policies on election disinformation. And in general, there's just a lot less less transparency into what the platforms are doing, because they've all cut off researcher access to the platform. So where independent groups, academics, journalists were able to say, hang on, we think this is happening, there's something fishy going on here, we don't have the full picture anymore. And again, that's in part because of that political pressure to not respond to disinformation that might be disenfranchising Americans or leading them astray as they go to the ballot box, whether it's coming from a foreign or a domestic source this Tuesday.
Nina, we got a little more than 30 seconds left. I know this is your professional passion, but it's also personal for you. If you don't mind, could you share the story about how you yourself were the victim of a disinformation campaign?
Sure. So in your opening, you said I was the disinformation czar. That's what the right wing likes to call me. I was just an executive director of a board that was coordinating responses in DHS to disinformation. We were setting policy to make sure that freedom of speech and expression were adhered to when the government was responding to disinformation. And I was widely lied about. I was threatened because of that work. And I ended up resigning because at the time I was pregnant with my son. This was over 2 years ago now. And my family was getting, credibly threatened by my fellow Americans. I want to assure everybody here that, fighting disinformation doesn't mean censoring people. It means getting good information out there. So as you're navigating this information environment over the next couple of weeks, just really listen to yourself. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is. If you feel yourself getting emotional, you might be getting manipulated. So proceed with caution.
Put your critical thinking hat on.
There you go. Good words to live by. Nina Jankowicz, CEO of the American Sunlight Project. We appreciate you being here tonight, Nina. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, we want to bring this conversation back home. Joining us is Joe Curtatone, president of the Alliance for Climate Transition. Of course, you know him because he served for 18 years as mayor of Somerville. Joe, when you hear Nina's personal story, what's your emotion? What comes to mind? Because she went through, that was just a little sentence about what she went through, but it was terrible.
Yeah, it's scary. I want to thank her for her leadership. But listening to her speak brings back a lot of memories on my time as mayor and what has happened in the last 10 years with the increasing velocity of sources of disinformation and misinformation and that rhetoric that was so harmful, and to my work now at the Alliance for Climate Transition to help us achieve our clean energy future, unlock our climate economy, and the dangers that disinformation and misinformation pose.
There was a moment when you could count on what was then Twitter for emergency response and good information, and we just went through this terrible hurricanes and storms, and FEMA employees were being threatened, and the information was terrible. Can you talk a little bit about how that's an obstacle for public service officials, emergency response, and just day-to-day work in the business of government?
Yeah, right. And I spent 18 years as mayor, and you sit back and you listen to Nina and you say, my God, since when did our democratic institutions and how we administer critical services to people become so politicized? Our healthcare response, our emergency response, or our wanting to achieve our climate action goals, or just, and you sit there in bewilderment, and it is difficult. So, look, we see the real life consequences and what puts people at risk, blaming your federal government for creating storms and attacking FEMA workers. We see the hurtful and targeted rhetoric to undocumented immigrants or Haitian immigrants in this campaign. And going back to, I remember when Donald Trump was first elected, saying undocumented immigrants, and this was parroted with misinformation, disinformation, are taking your jobs. They're stealing from your community. They're driving up crime, when in fact, it was shown that white males had a higher crime rate and driving up crime in sanctuary cities like Somerville, where some of the safest communities and had historically low crime rates. And we're seeing it now in our right here as we try to achieve our climate action goals. It's having an eroding effect on the public's confidence in climate technologies, and offshore wind projects, solar projects, transmission lines that need to be upgraded to meet our clean energy goals. So as a local officials, you pride yourself in getting stuff done, and you ask yourselves, how can we get things done with the confidence in the public if we cannot have a conversation based on the truth and on facts? Let's
just talk about the Group Alliance for Climate Transition. You have a tool on your website that helps fight disinformation.
Right. We have a misinformation state by state tracker. There are 64 points of misinformation, disinformation, and we put that right in our power in the hands of the people. So put that information out. The public can put that information out instantaneously on different social media outlets. and you've got that information in your hands. So the lie never becomes the truth. People can go to www.joinact.org and check it out.
All right, Joe Curtatone, president of the Alliance for Climate Transition. We appreciate the conversation.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so Sue, I know you've been working with our friend Jose Rivera Adravet, the main anchor with Telemundo Nueva Inglaterra. What did you two get up to?
Well, Corey, you and I, right, we have talked a lot about how pollsters finally seem to understand the complexities of the Latino and the Hispanic vote. The community is so diverse and varied that it really shouldn't be limited to one single voting bloc or a single party. So Jose and I invited Republican consultant Ozzy Palombo to talk about what the Republican Party does right and wrong with the Latino community. Take a look. Ozzy, can you tell us what specific issues or messages the Republican Party is using that really are resonating with Latino voters?
Absolutely. I think the issues that are resonating are largely issues that are resonating across the board. The focus on the economy and certainly pocketbook issues of what all families across the board, but certainly Hispanic and Latino families care about. And the second one is the immigration matter. There's obviously, like many other demographics before Hispanics, whether it be the Irish, the Italian, the Germans that all came through. I think the more that the roots are set in this country, you start to see a little bit of divide across the board. And immigration is one of those issues that, at least today, people are looking at what's happening on the border on the illegal immigration side and being concerned, both from a crime and safety perspective and the impact that that has on daily life, but also because of the fact that many of the families that have come, in the generation before did it differently. And so I think that's a concern going forward. And those two issues, I think, are the top two that seem to resonate with, again, demographics across the board, but certainly with the Hispanic community today.
Also, let's talk about values. What values does Trump and his campaign represent for Latinos at a time when we are witnesses? There's strong rhetoric that he's doing in each event. Take for example, the garbage thing, on the New York convention. Give us a little bit of perspective about this.
Yeah, first and foremost, I thought the joke was way out of line and disgusting. I myself have family in Juncos, Puerto Rico. On my dad's side, obviously, I'm from Costa Rica. But the joke was obviously uncalled for, out of place, and out of character, and had no value whatsoever there, to be said and made. The Trump campaign did distance itself from that joke almost immediately. You had the Trump spokesperson, Caroline Leavitt, come out and say that the president didn't agree with that going forward. So I think putting that aside, it was poorly done, bad taste, and it was by a comedian that obviously is known for that, but perhaps not the right venue for it to be stated. As far as values, we talked a little bit about immigration and the economy, and I think those are core issues that families continue to care about. The issue with Trump is, and it's across the board, is he's going to say things that not everybody agrees with. And he's certainly taken positions, perhaps a little bit too extreme at times, that may impact some within the Hispanic communities. But folks are kind of seeing through that and looking at the big picture instead of kind of focusing on pixels. But I think at the core, at the campaign, are issues that the Hispanic families care about.
There is a lot of Puerto Ricans in the island and obviously here that are still asking for a sorry from Donald Trump. You think that there is any chance to him to say sorry to the Puerto Rican people because what happened in that event? Or do you think that is not necessary?
Yeah, I think the campaign and came out immediately and said that was uncalled for. They didn't agree with it. Whether or not Donald Trump came out and did a formal apology or handwritten note, I don't think we're going to see that from him. But he did distance himself from that statement going forward. He also was almost immediately a day or two after on stage with Marco Rubio, who is a Hispanic American senator, proving that that support is still strong in there. But I think the comedian, aside, it's a non-factor. He said it. It was poorly done. It was disgraceful. The campaign distanced himself from it, and then they went back to focusing on issues that he wanted to start with his closing arguments this week.
Sabemos que el Partido Republicano obviamente tiene siempre un tema migratorio que compartir, con sus constituyentes, a quienes quieren captar ese voto. ¿Está haciendo lo suficiente el Partido Republicano para convencer a los que realmente son latinos inmigrantes a que voten por el Partido Republicano?
I think so, and I think you got to convince them with the arguments that are going to impact their everyday life. You've immigrated to this country, and again, by and large, the Republican agenda is to focus on a capitalistic message of economic growth, and people understand that you need immigration into this country, to have economic growth. It's worked before. It's the foundation and the basis of the birth of this country is to be, it was created by immigrants across the board, and it's now, from a Hispanic standpoint, it feels like it's our time.
So, Jose, we heard at Madison Square Garden the comedian say Puerto Rico is a floating island of garbage. How are those comments impacting how Puerto Ricans may ultimately vote?
Corey, for sure, I'm seeing anger here and in state with a high population of Puerto Ricans, for example. Give us two examples, states like Pennsylvania and Florida. We'll see for sure the impact of that anger next week. With that said, back to you guys.
All right,
Thank you, Jose.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Hey, we want to remind you that we have primers on all the ballot questions here in Massachusetts. Just scan that QR code on the screen. That's going to take you to our website, NBC10boston.com, where we have a comprehensive guide on all 5 questions. Sue, Ozzy's in a tough position.
Yeah.
You know, obviously, he's a part of the community that has just been put through the ringers since that Madison Square Garden rally. What do you think it is like for Latino Republicans right now on the heels of all of this?
Well, I'll tell you, Corey, Jose and I were looking to speak with a voter to come in, a Hispanic or Latino voter who was a Republican or leaned toward Republican, and we had a very hard time finding someone who would want to come in and talk about it, even though they were registered as a Republican. And then after the comments last weekend, I was talking to someone who said, you know, I really just don't want to come in and have to address that issue. So I appreciate Ozzy doing that for us. But this is the sort of shoot yourself in the foot issue that keeps happening with the Republican Party when it comes to Latinos and Hispanics and African Americans and all sorts. There's values that Republicans have that are accessible to all sorts of people. And then something happens like this, and it's hard. I had a friend tell me it's an issue of pride, because I said, what happened here? You've been insulted before. Why is this remark the thing that put you over? And they said, it's an issue of pride. Our pride has been insulted. So now the Republican Party, whatever happens, they're going to have to go back and start all over again and try and build that.
All right, 30 seconds, final weekend of the campaign. What does Harris need to do? What does Trump need to do?
Well, Harris has to make no mistakes and just stay on message. And Donald Trump, I don't know what Donald Trump has to do, to tell you the truth, Corey. I would say don't make any mistakes, but that seems hard to do. But they both have to be on the battleground states and get the vote out. Trump has to get his vote out. I know it sounds obvious, but if you don't get the vote out, you really just cannot win. So no mistakes, either campaign, put your head down. Don't have your surrogates make any more mistakes. You know, lock up Elon Musk, lock up Joe Biden, keep your nose to the grindstone.
All right, 4 days left to do it. Thank you, Sue, and thank you so much for joining us. Join us again on Sunday, because we're going to be live as we prepare for the final stretch run of this presidential race. Market research guru Diane Hessen shares with us the information that she's gleaned after talking to hundreds of voters. It is live Sunday on At Issue here on NBC 10 Boston.